Hello guys, bersama saya lagi dalam Alright Nopo Channel. So ini dia satu forum soal jawab bersama dengan Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, Perdana Menteri kita. Jadi dalam forum Ilmuwan Madani Siri yang keempat. Jadi dalam ini dia bukan hanya ada Perdana Menteri kita sebagai panel ya dalam menjawab soalan-soalan yang dikemukakan. Antara yang juga Tengku Zafrul, Menteri MITI dan seorang lagi individu. Dan kita boleh nampak sahabat semua, inilah satu program yang mana membuka minda untuk kita berfikir bersama bagaimana untuk mengembangkan dan membangunkan ekonomi negara kita khususnya. Jadi terbaik ya kepada usaha ini yang dianjurkan ya sebenarnya dianjurkan oleh kementerian ya dianjurkan sendiri oleh kalau saya tidak salah kementerian ya dikelola atas kelolaan Kementerian Pendidikan Tinggi. Jadi seperti yang saya katakan dalam siri ini menampilkan 3 tokoh industri dan pemimpin yaitu Menteri Pelaburan seperti yang saya katakan tadi dan seorang lagi adalah Presiden dan Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif kumpulan Mebeng. Jadi sahabat semua tanpa membuang masa ayo kita bersama-sama untuk menonton video ini untuk kita mengetahui soalan dan juga jawapan-jawapan yang diberikan oleh ketiga panel ini termasuklah
eliminating oppression, speculation and harmful activities. The next one is about Keterangkuman Kewangan or financial inclusivity. The third part is urusan yang telus dan adil, transparent and fair dealings. The fourth part is about kecemerlangan dalam kualiti perkhidmatan, service quality. Last but not least is about environmental preservation. So these principles are the ones that are anchoring whatever we do. You will notice, these principles very much align with Sharia principles. Right? And this is where we're linking Sharia principles with values and sustainability as well. Yeah? And we are driven on this in whatever we do. So I'll stop there, Brahma.
Terima kasih. Surah Tuan Saleh kerana pembentangan ini. Saya lihat ada anjakan besar daripada pandangan konvensional tentang bank dalam sistem modal dan kapitalis. Jadi nampak ada suatu anjakan. Saya ingat satu hal yang patut kita wacanakan. Apakah matlamat yang disebut itu soal keadilan sosial, keterangkuman, suatu menyantuni kehendak pengguna di peringkat rendah yang memenuhi maksud maqasid syariah, matlamat syariah itu tentang penyertaan atau participatory, tentang mengurangkan kesenjangan. Itu boleh kita wacanakan, tapi saya terima kasih kerana pembentangan ini memberikan gambaran tentang melihat satu bank yang kita anggap konvensional tetapi pendekatannya itu telah memperlihatkan satu anjakan daripada pandangan yang biasa kepada suatu pendekatan yang lebih merakyat. Itu dari segi teorinya, pelaksanaan sudah tahu sejauh mana dapat mencapai matlamat yang diungkapkan tadi. Baik, kita terus dengan saudara Senator Tengku Zafrul yang sekarang mengetuai satu kementerian yang kritikal bagi kita. Untuk menjana pertumbuhan, kita perlukan pelaburan. Dan pelaburan berarti upayaan untuk memasarkan, menjual, memberikan satu insentif dan penjelasan yang menarik. Dan setakat ini saya ucap terima kasih kerana beliau banyak membantu dan percaya walaupun dari segi politik dia lebih kontroversial daripada saya. Jadi saya persilakan. Dia bercakap bukan sebagai banker, sebagai Menteri MITI.
Okey, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat malam, salam Malaysia Madani. Terima kasih Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim dan Menteri Malaysia dan Seri KSN. Terima kasih juga kerana sudi hadir dan saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada Datuk Seri Zamri yang telah menganjurkan malam ini, majlis malam ini, dia terpaksa tinggalkan majlis awal kerana dia ada mesyuarat MKT. Ya. Tapi saya ada di sini bersama Perdana Menteri. YB Shah ada. Okey, so kita berdua lah. Pada malam ini saya dipahamkan kita ada dibenarkan 5 slide, so I'll keep it to 5 slide. I'll speak a bit in English so that few of members of the audience can understand, but my slides are in Bahasa Malaysia. I'll give a perspective from a policymaker. I'll try to talk a bit about perspective from MITI, but also a perspective from where the Madani framework is coming from, which is about inclusivity and also, in a way, sustainability, which is also in line with the ASEAN. So my slides, next slide. It's slightly different from Maybank, which is Maybank-centric. I'm, as the ex-CEO of CIMB, I'm very happy to see that Maybank has caught up with proposals, which is similar. Joking ni, Dato' Karusel. Nanti dia tak nak sponsor kita punya ASEAN forum. Okay, but on serious note, Fintech sebagai pemangkin keterangkuman, I think one thing that we all must realize is the importance the Fintech plays. I mean, later the guy on my left will talk a bit about this. But when you talk about ekonomi Madani, I think Muhammad Perdana Menteri selalu menekankan mengenai isu keterangkuman. We are talking about many Malaysians out there who are underbanked in a way, underserved as well, but also not just individuals but companies. And I'm glad to see Maybank also addressing this. Tetapi what is important is for the government, not just in terms of policy, but also creating the infrastructure to enable companies or banks like Maybank to provide that solution that is required so that our country can be more inclusive. So one area that I think Yang Muhammad Perdana Menteri selalu menekankan, that he mentioned about pelaburan, is we need to create and attract the right ecosystem, the right environment for investments to come in. And digital economy needs that kind of investment. And before we can use the application that Maybank has shown, we need to make sure the highway is there, the digital infrastructure is there. So data center is one, of course, but also if we look at how we can get the spillover, right, from Fintech, we want to make sure that bukan saja rakyat and syarikat, PMK semua dapat the benefit of using Fintech, but at the same time, how do the spillover of applying and building the infrastructure for Fintech for Malaysia. And di sini, Master Forum Economy semalam pun, Yang Muhammad Perdana Menteri ada menyebut mengenai semiconductor. It also link back. Anything you talk about Fintech, you talk about the computer processing power that's required, it's all bring back to the chip, which is the semiconductor industry. And I mentioned sustainability as well, because like it or not, with the advancement of technology, we also need to ensure that energy transition also plays a role in this. So next slide. So the next slide. So this is when we look at where we want to head in the next, in this case, next 6 years. We talk about financial technology. It also talk about inovasi digital that is now revolutionizing the financial services. Now we hear about even banks that are competing with other banks, new banks, digital banks. Recently, Prime Minister went to see launch 2 digital banks in Malaysia, and of course Maybank and all the other conventional banks are also already in this space. We want to make sure that for us, when we look at supply chain, we want to look at manufacturing, we want to look at green technology. All these are all interlinked, and as policymaker, we want to see how we can support the industry and how we can support to make sure that the plans that we have is a plan that is also inclusive, competitive, and also mapan. Just to give the number, when we look at this number before, Fintech globally is about $320 billion and akan naik 5 kali ganda, hampir $1.5 trillion. And the Fintech is also driven by generative AI and etc. And that's why I think in banks now, you're using generative AI to answer questions, etc. No more, your customer call center or even your are answered by AI. So, next slide. So this is because we're talking about ASEAN and you see the ASEAN logo there. I just want to touch briefly about how financial technology is also enabling integration within ASEAN. As we chair ASEAN this year, one of the major milestone or major economic deliverables that we are targeting is the Digital Economic Framework Agreement, which we hope to conclude this year. What does it mean? There are three things that we are focusing on. One, it will allow our companies, especially our small, medium enterprises and micro, small, medium enterprises, to have access to the global market, but in this case for ASEAN as a region. And through financial technology, you can make the payment, you can make the necessary financial transaction through DEFA. And again, without Fintech, we will not be able to do this. Secondly, if you look at where ASEAN is today, one of the other targets is to increase the integration of, to deepen the trade between ASEAN countries. Again, I always hear Muhammad Perdana Menteri always talk about increasing intra-ASEAN trade. Today, intra-ASEAN trade is only 22 to 23%. So because it's only done by major large companies. But as you know, ASEAN is driven by SMEs as well. So hopefully, that's why we talked about Fintech being more inclusive, bring inclusivity to the game. And the other one is, if you look at globally, we are now, as a member of many member of many multilateral agreements and also bilateral agreements, 16 in total, and inshallah next week will be 17 with signing dengan UAE. So we are looking at how financial technology can also be a major instrument in all these trade agreements that we sign. There's a single window, there's RCEP, there's semua ini sebenarnya menggunakan Fintech as a foundation, as an enabler. People might not see it, but companies are all using financial technology in trade. Next. So this is my last slide because I think we want we want to keep the forum open and with discussions. So I think all the relevant semua pihak berkepentingan, all the stakeholders, investors, government, academia, I think we need to look at what NIMP is and also NETR and see how it's linked back to Fintech. In fact, NIMP, two out of the four missions is linked to technology, and all are linked to financial technology as well. And then if you look at most of the challenges that we face today is that at the end of the day, what we want to achieve is three things. One is we want to ensure that Malaysians all are included in the growth. Everybody talk about GDP growth. They always question sama ada dia dapat rasa tak peningkatan KDNK. So because sometimes not everyone feels it. So this is about inclusivity, and hopefully with technology we can ensure that as many people benefit from that. But on the downside, there's also technological gaps that we need to address. When we talk about Fintech in ASEAN or even Fintech in Malaysia, not everybody have access to the technology. So there is another issue that we need to address. And then on final note, for us, we need to ensure that we all work as one. I think as said this year, the whole of government approach, but also whole of nation approach, where all of you in this room will have a role to play to ensure that whatever application, in this case Fintech, has a result and has an outcome that's both inclusive and sustainable. Thank you, Ya Muhammad.
Terima kasih Saudara Tengku Zafrul. Sebelum ini kita dengar Maybank ni dan setelah dari segi perbankan adalah gergasi di rantau. Di sini tentunya besar juga di Indonesia dan beberapa negara lain. Dan kita harus memanfaatkan ini untuk menjana perdagangan yang lebih agresif, dan ini ditekankan oleh saudara Tengku Zafrul, dan sebab itu ada kebijakan ekonomi melalui pelan perindustrian. Dan kalau saudara baca peran perindustrian yang terbaru ini, dia bukan suatu pengulangan atau penambahan. Dia memberikan fokus kepada sektor. Ya. Dan di antara yang ditekankan termasuklah digital dan apa yang disebut dalam bidang tenaga. Dan dalam ASEAN kita beruntung kerana hubungan yang sangat baik di antara jiran-jiran kita. Maknanya dalam 1 bulan ini kita ada lawatan dari Perdana Menteri Thailand, Perdana Menteri Singapura, Presiden Prabowo Indonesia semalam, dan dengan cohesiveness begini rupa, dia menjadi tarikan. Di Turkmenistan datang untuk juga menggalakkan kerjasama kita dengan Asia Tengah. Dan Jepun, Ishiba tadi, mengunjungi Malaysia. Tetapi ini negara pertama yang dia pilih setelah menjadi Perdana Menteri. Ya. Dan tentunya dalam perbincangan yang agak komprehensif, saya agak tertarik kerana di antara perbincangan tertutup dan juga 2 hala bilateral yang agak paling panjang dan paling komprehensif. Dia menyentuh bidang-bidang yang agak secara yang sangat serius. Jadi cuma ada beberapa isu yang kita harus tekankan kerana seperti yang Saudara Zafrul sebut ini, korporat-korporat besar ni dia syarikat-syarikat besar. Dan kita ada agak keperluan menekankan, dia ada sebut juga, seperti disebut sebagai mitah lalu lah, tentang PMKS ni. Kerana semua daripada CIMB, Maybank, mana dia ambil berat sangat pasal itu. Jadi sebab itu malam ini selain daripada yang kita tekankan, kita minta kerjasama Kameng Wong yang dari Funding Society Malaysia yang akan juga memberikan penekanan tentang PMKS di rantau ini. Kerana saya tahu kekuatan PMK sangat besar. Dan di antara kritikan yang saya terima peringkat awal bila saya jadi Perdana Menteri dan juga sebelumnya, bahawa Malaysia tidak memberikan dukungan rangsangan yang cukup kuat kepada PMKS. Maka dalam belanjawan madani masuk tahun lalu, kita telah memberikan satu suntikan yang agak besar dan penumpuan dengan memberi penekanan kepada agasi-agasi pusat untuk memberikan pertimbangan khas. Jadi persilakan.
Thank you, Dr. Sri. Good evening, everyone. Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, Prime Minister of Malaysia, YB Senator Datuk Sri Utama Tengku Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz, Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry, YB Tan Sri Syamsul Azri bin Abu Bakar, Chief Secretary, YB Datuk Mustafa Samud, Deputy Minister of Higher Education. No, we will definitely share also in terms of some of the things that we observe as the key success factors of what we have experienced across the region, given where our footprint is. But I think to start off, I think we all recognize in terms of the impact and the importance of SMEs, in terms of the vast majority of businesses that they represent, contribution to GDP, contribution to employment. But having said that, they still seem to be having a lot of persistent challenges in terms of achieving growth. And I think we just wanted to talk a bit about how then, from our perspective, has helped to overcome some of those challenges and help them to drive the growth that they desire. I think from our own experience, I think we are quite familiar with the fact that SMEs are has limited access to credit, but from our experience, it goes beyond just that. Maybe we can push to the next slide. Oh, thank you. Yes.
I press for you.
Oh, it's okay. No worries. Thank you. But I think it goes beyond just access to credit. I think SMEs also face challenges in terms of managing their cash flows, as well as managing the daily financial operations. Right? Yes. Thank you. And I think this has been traditionally an area that is structurally quite difficult to serve, given how heterogeneous and how different SMEs are, right, across the different industries and different sizes. So for example, when we serve a retailer or wholesalers that sells fish, they're going to have very different financial needs from someone who sells tires, although you can easily just classify them as wholesale or retail traders. Right? So we have taken a very specialized, structured approach towards how to overcome these challenges. So for us, we are a digital platform, and we focus on providing small and short-term financing by connecting them with both private as well as public institutional funding partners, such as SME Corp, Teraju, and MYCIF, right, amongst many others. We also help SMEs beyond lending to also make and receive payments much more seamlessly through a no-code solution. Beyond the funding partners, we also work with the likes of CGC and CGC Digital to help to make SMEs more creditworthy and hence giving them much broader access to financial services. And I think in this sense, we are also in parallel working with Maybank to come up with new innovative solutions to bring to the market to better serve the SME segment. I think we also were quite fortunate to be able to help support the Madani grant for SME digitalization in terms of reaching out and also to assess and also enable the payments for these grants to these SMEs. I think since launching in Malaysia 8 years ago, we've dispersed more than 4 billion ringgit to SMEs in Malaysia itself and supporting more than 40,000 SMEs along the way through both payments and lending propositions. Based on our estimate in 2021, it was a study with the Asian Development Bank. The funding that we have given regionally across all the other, inclusive of the 4 markets that we operate in, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and Singapore, has contributed an additional 16 billion ringgit in terms of GDP contribution and helped to add 350,000 jobs. Now, being in financial services, trust is very important. And a large part of our progress has been driven by the progressiveness and the forward-thinking stature or the posture of the regulatory framework. So I think just an example, the P2P financing regulatory framework was first announced in Malaysia amongst all the other ASEAN countries. And I think that paved the way to developing an industry that was balanced in terms of allowing innovation, but at the same time also protecting the consumer and the investors. Right? So I think that progressiveness has actually enabled Malaysia to be one of the most successful countries within our group. Right? And this has allowed us to also export some of the key innovations that we have developed internally. So for instance, digital instant loans and digital supply chain financing to other countries within the group itself. Just a few more minutes. Sorry about that. So I think we just wanted to get into a bit more specificity in terms of how we actually have used AI and technology in terms of improving the livelihoods and the growth of SMEs. We've actually taken inspiration from Dato' Cairo and Maybank to incorporate AI and technology across the life cycle of the SME. Right? So to us, it's a must-have, not a nice-to-have, because of the thin margins that we earn, as well as the shorter-term financing proposition, and also the very manual, relatively manual, offline nature of SMEs in Malaysia. So to that end, we have taken a hybrid approach. So we have a fully digital journey that SMEs can go to our website and apply for their needs, financing needs, end-to-end, without having to speak or meet with anyone. But at the same time also, if they do need help, we have an offline, very friendly team to help them along the journey. We've taken an offline to online approach for, let's say, the SMEs that prefer to have an offline experience, but we try to nudge them online through basically digital proposition and user experiences that are quite user-friendly. So one example is the digital supply chain financing proposition. We focus on short-term financing, and a big part of it is usually trade finance. Typically, this is reserved for commercial, mid-market, and large corporates because they are relatively low margin and very much paperwork dependent. But through the digital supply chain financing, we've been able to push it out to the SMEs so they can actually log in, they can actually monitor their financing limits, they can request for disbursements, and they can manage their repayments all through the digital portal itself. And it's actually implemented across all 100% of our customers. So now they're actually all self-serve, which makes the whole business model feasible. So I think at the end of the day, just to also take a step back, that the innovation that we see here is not just purely about efficiency gains and about productivity, but it's also about inclusion. Because what it means is that now we are able to serve a much wider population of the SME segment, particularly the smaller SMEs that require maybe smaller amounts of financing for shorter periods that may not be previously be profitable to do. Right? So I think in closing, we have come a long way since 2017 that we launched in Malaysia, and I think we have seen much progress, candidly speaking. But I think there's still more to be done, and I think on that note, policymakers, industry leaders, regulators would definitely need to come together collaboratively to basically fulfill the potential for digital financial services and empower and grow the economy much better in a much more inclusive manner. Thank you. That's it.
No, thank you, Ming Wong and Funding Society, because you cannot underestimate the importance and the role they have played, because one major problem is the reluctance and the resistance by the SMEs to undertake this change. You see, in terms of digitalization, and that affects, for example, policy and foreign workers, and the, for example, the low capacity production, not utilizing to the maximum, partly because of the reluctance to affect change. Now, I believe that probably private sector initiatives like this, Funding Society, can be more effective, and we will get through Zafrul to get the relevant institutions supposed to help to manage. Because there's a huge capacity of SMEs, but it's generally termed as comfortable and rather conservative in terms of undertaking change, because they fear. The moment you talk about digitalization, I remember when budget dialogue that we had, they think this is going to cost so much money, so much new investment, and they do not have the capacity, they think so. But then, with, for example, your effort probably to show to them that it's not that expensive, nor difficult, because they think there's something new, and people, especially my age, you know, the moment you talk about digitalization, something Greek to us. Yesterday, in Miller's book, Cheap Wars, everybody told me that, you know, it's easy reading, you know. But I had to struggle with the introduction and the first chapter. But with some effort, and you realize it's not as difficult, but just to get them to be more focused and interested. So thank you very much. Baik, sekarang ini masa untuk saudara bertanya dan kritik. Tak payah banyak formality dia, protokol, tak ada protokol. Tanya aja, tak payah yang amat. Kalau nak tanya, kalau nak sebut, penuh. Yang amat, buah amat, Datuk Seri, Utama, Diraja, macam-macam baru habis. Kalau tidak, sebut terus soal. Tak payah. Okey? Baik. Terima kasih, Ustaz.
Terima kasih, Datuk Seri. Soalan saya kepada Presiden Maybank. Report saya daripada juga Fauzan daripada UIA dan juga Gabungan Bertindak Anti-Scam Malaysia. Kita dapati tahun ini saja, tahun 2024, kita hilang 1.7 bilion ringgit Malaysia through jenayah scam. 1.2 billion, saya repeat, Presiden, 1.2 billion. It is not small money, bukan kecil. Dan mangsanya adalah orang kecil ni. Ikan bilis, jangan kena tangkap mil account. Tapi punishmentnya hanya kecil. Maybank, CIMB tak rugi apa-apa. Because yang hilang hanya depositors. Tadi sepanjang presentation tadi, tidak ada berusaha macam mana nak mengihsankan. You did menginsankan tapi tak ada ihsankan. Bagaimana you want to care and compassion orang yang hilang jenayah scam ni. Not just Maybank, but the whole entire bank. So bagi saya, Maybank, all bank providers kena bertanggungjawab. Sikap bertanggungjawab. It's happened in your house. The losing are depositors. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Memang betul, scam ni is a major issue in the industry. Kalau apologies kita tak cover ni because I've only got 5 minutes, but certainly banking sector, including Maybank, together with Bank Negara, we have actually worked tirelessly to put things in place. Say for example, education I think is important, right? First and foremost is about providing awareness and education on how, to educate people out there to see some signs of possible scam. Banking sector alone last year, invested about 10 million ringgit just for awareness, let alone to upgrade the system. Satu lagi ialah feature-feature yang telah diintroducekan pada application lah. So contohnya sekarang ni kalau nak tukar telefon kan untuk application transaction online, kita ada bagi 12 jam sebelum kita aktifkan semula supaya kalau ada apa-apa yang terjadi, ada keraguan waktu itu dan pelanggan tu boleh telefon, masih ada waktu. Bank Negara pun sekarang ni dah ketatkan lagi dia punya guidelines against the banks, to make sure that the responsibility is clear. Now, the other part of it is that maybe Yang Mahormat, this is where I can also request, because when you look at online scam, as far as the value chain is concerned, right, it's not just the banks. Before they even want to get a bank app, they buy a phone. And they buy a phone, they buy a line, telephone line, right? All these transactions go through telephone lines. We need the telcos to also take accountability. So in Singapore, for example, the regulator and even the authorities have included the telcos to also be a party to be responsible. Because if you look at the phones, kalau kita, we already know who is the registered owner, right? Kalau ada apa-apa yang kita keraguan, can we get the information straight from the telco to say who is the owner of this? But I must say, unfortunately, it's, we're not getting the assistance. I am president of the Association of Banks as well. I'm requesting that again. I've also requested for Bank Negara if we can get telcos to be part of this as well. I think it's a major issue, but I think it has dropped now. Again, together with Bank Negara, we have even got a portal of scam, etc. The number year on year has reduced with all these things, but a lot more can be done. I agree.
Cuma nak sebut memang Bank Negara sedang coordinate, telcos has been informed. Ada cadangan untuk pindah kuasa digital untuk kawal social media kadang-kadang terlalu melalui social media tentang financial scam dan lain-lain. Jadi ini sedang diperhatikan. Tapi kebimbangan kita ada reaksi bahawa nampak macam undang-undang itu terlalu ketat. But we have to look at it. Yes, please.
Terima kasih. My first question is to May Wong on this funding society. But Fintech is very critical. You have worked across many regions and also in Singapore. And you have to operate in different regime and regulatory regime. So many of our funding society, our startup are not doing as much as what you're doing progressively. And in Singapore, because YB Dato was saying that we have too many agencies. In Singapore, Fintech is under the Singapore Monetary Authority, one stop for all Fintechs. Here we have so many agencies handling Fintech. So it is a big challenge because we want to be a startup ecosystem, the top 20 by 2030. So can you share about your experience in dealing with different regimes so that Malaysia can actually look whether we should rationalize? There's so many funding agencies for fintechs, whereas in some countries highly centralized and easy for the fintech to grow. So the second question is to Mr. Zafrul. You know that I organized as a chairman of the bank, I have organized a meeting of all the chairmen of banks, how we fund the industrial master plan. Because 70% of the banking portfolio is still on auto and also mortgages. So we need to shift our funding if we want to achieve the medium income of 4,005 by 2030. Do you see the banks are doing enough to fund automation, mechatronics, and all the spillover effects? Because I find the bank is not doing enough. After the chairman forum, I think MITI has to have closer collaboration with the banking society, with the banking community to fund the industrial master plan in the next 5 years. Otherwise, we are back to square one. So your comment on the role of the banks. And my question to Dato' Khairul, the bank, I was coordinating the Islamic Fintech and launched its master plan. And I invite all the banks for the discussion. And the complaint from the Islamic Fintech is that the bank is not as inclusive. They see them as a threat, rather as a part of the ecosystem. May not be Maybank, but many of them has problems getting their growth momentum of the Islamic Fintech or the Fintech, because the bank are not seeing that as part of the ecosystem. I just want to see whether there is a mindset change among the bank to see more inclusive to get the Fintechs as part of it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I think maybe if I can clarify my understanding, the question is around whether it was the experiences navigating the government institutions and agencies to get the necessary support to grow the business in Malaysia versus in other markets perhaps. So that was my understanding of the question. I think a bit more background. So I was the co-founder for the Malaysian business as well. So I came back here didn't have anything, had to figure out how to open a bank account, and then what a corporate secretary was, because I was in a corporate job previously. But I think those early days was definitely a bit more challenging because no one knew who we were and what we did. Fintech was a bit of a foreign word. But I think over the past couple of years, the journey has been I think it was very clear to us who we need to go to. So for instance, in Malaysia, we are, one of the main counterparts they work with, let's say it's MDEC. So they have been actually quite useful in terms of connecting us with other ecosystem players within the tech startups ecosystem, because partnerships is one of our go-to-market strategies. So we work with them, let's say some agro-food type platforms to help to provide financing to, say, farmers or smallholders. So MTech has been actually one of those parties that we work with quite closely in order to get access to these startups. I think just to put it into numbers, Malaysia is the largest, if not the most successful country within the 5 countries that we operate in, whether in terms of book size, in terms of the numbers of SMEs that we have impacted and supported. So I think there are a couple of agencies that we see out there, but it has never been an issue whereby we get bounced around and we don't know what to do next. They're all very willing to work with us. And the experience in Singapore is very similar. So you go to one or two agencies, and then they just tell you, okay, these are the things, these are the different financing support that you can have. These are the ecosystem in the tech space. These are who we can connect you with. I think what sort of like puts Malaysia a bit further ahead, I think, is from a regulatory perspective. So I think the interesting point is that, so we're regulated under SC. And then under the SC, there's the digital and innovation arm, which they have been actually quite helpful in terms of connecting us with the different government agencies and ministries. So for example, for agriculture, they connected us with AgroBank. So then now we have conversations with AgroBank, for instance, in terms of how do we want to serve and reach out to smallholders and farmers and providing financing. So I think that is perhaps one of the bigger differences compared to working with regulators in other markets. So I think as a whole, at least from our own experience, the journey has been what you would expect, right? Working with governments and regulators.
Thank you. So the question, for those of you who may not be aware about the Industrial Master Plan, for the Industrial Master Plan, one of the targets, as mentioned, is to increase household income. And we want to increase household income with a mean of 4,500 ringgit by the year 2030 for the manufacturing sector in particular. So the four mission, one of them is to increase economic complexity, will mean that more companies that come into Malaysia or more companies that are already in Malaysia, when they move up the value chain, with the companies becoming more sophisticated, salary will then go in line with the increasing economic complexity. Back to the question, then what can we achieve this if the financial services are not playing their part? Actually, we know how important financial services is to the whole ecosystem, the whole equation of achieving those targets under Industrial Master Plan. We quantified it as 90 billion ringgit. Not all under the financial services, basically looking at financial support from equity markets, from debt markets, I mean equity and debt in the capital markets, the private equity markets, the venture capital markets. So it covers the whole vertical of financing. So banks, I think, will play a major role. I think your question, I think, more towards the banks. We have been trying, and sorry, we have been engaging. We tried and now successfully engaged. There are, of course, to be fair to the banks, their risk appetite may not be as high as some of the others in that vertical. So for the like of Maybank, for example, they will come in at the different stage of development of the company, maybe pre-IPO or even IPO but again, we also need to educate the banks, because when you look at capacity building within banks, they are always used to the traditional sectors, the plantation sector, the construction sector, so the digital economy, especially when it comes to semiconductor, is still very new to them. But it's not new to Malaysia. 50% of our manufacturing export is semiconductor. 40% of total exports is E&E. But if you look at the funding, they are coming mainly from foreign banks. So this is where I think with the National Semiconductor Strategy launched by our Prime Minister, we'll try and educate, engage the financial services sector, especially the local banks, to see how they can play a role in building the local champions in this. And I think Maybank has been quite instrumental in this. Thank you.
If I may add to that point, so for example, in Maybank, we have now even set up a new risk acceptance criteria or risk appetite to be able to finance these SMEs in the semiconductor business, right? And of course, one of the ways is to be able to use supply chain financing, because we know that the principles are big and the principles are good credit worthiness. And we will then, rely on these big principles to finance them based on a cash flow basis. Yeah? So that's what we're doing. I think the other question from Dato is about banks' willingness to work with fintechs, right? And of course, on the Islamic side in particular. If you ask me maybe 5 years ago, banks were a bit apprehensive on fintech, right? They look at them as competitors, but it's different now. Now it's more about collaborating with fintech, because a lot of the capabilities that banks have now, are still outdated, and if they continue the way they're doing now, fintech will overtake them. And banks that are willing to work with fintech will be the one that will progress faster. So it's a competitive environment that is taking place now. Yeah, similarly with us, we used to maybe look at Funding Society a few years ago as our competitor, but now we are even investing in Funding Society. We want to work with them, to collaborate with them, right, and identify opportunities for relationship. On the Islamic side, for example, for Maybank, I mentioned in my presentation, there are two things at least we are doing already in Malaysia. One is what we call the Salam market. We are doing already with Orong platform, which is a fintech, basically for them to bring the buyers and the sellers, B2B, as a marketplace, and then again we can help them with the banking solutions, the payments, the credit facility as well. The other one is the halal certification. We are actually facilitating halal facilitation online. And we have got this app called SingSoft, to be able to work, to facilitate, and of course, make the application to JAKIM for purposes of halal certification. In Indonesia, for example, we are also progressing from a halal point of view. We are even working with Muhammadiyah ecosystem, right? For example, to penetrate the Islamic community. As you know, Muhammadiyah is huge. So again, my point is about, I think fintech, end of the day, is about collaboration, no more competition. Whoever doesn't work with fintech, banks especially, they will fall behind. Yeah, for sure, because banks have got a lot of legacy, and if they are still continuing with their legacy, they will fall behind.
Assalamualaikum, Azman from Era Management. Quick question, especially to Datuk Khairul. I think for SMEs, they seem to have a challenge in getting funding, mainly because of ESG requirements. I see that a lot. And the reason is because I think most of the banks put the evaluations on the ESG very high. So SMEs, of course, some of them do not have the means to invest in an ESG initiative. Now, my thinking is that we should actually have tiered punya evaluation for the SMEs, because if you look at the UN SDG punya initiatives, there are 17 areas where they can comply. But it seems to me that the banks, when they want to actually fund some of the SMEs, they put these people even at the highest, sama macam kita lah, listed companies. So that's why a lot of SMEs do not get funding. And even if they get funding, the cost of funds, that they push to the SMEs lagi tinggi. So that, defeats the purpose of them going to the banks as well. So can, let's say, Maybank, and through your chairmanship of the bankers and also with Bank Negara, perhaps look at a tiered system in terms of evaluating the SMEs when they're actually coming for loans to the banks, because I think that will help a lot. Thank you.
For Khairul respond, may I support that notion, because that has been a major issue which we did discuss even in the cabinet. When we embark on this new agenda to push the SMEs, the major complaint is, of course, source of funds. Very difficult. Number two, even when they gain, issue of collateral, etc., the cost of funds is substantially higher. And I think Khairul better respond carefully.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of criticism, thrown at banks for not supporting SME. There are mechanisms. I think Gus April mentioned about the different level of maturity of SME, and at the various levels of maturity, there's a different source of funding, right? So you need angel investor, equity, etc., banks, etc. Now, when we look at credit for SME, then again, there are different types, right? Then depending on whether it's straightforward or not, there is also credit enhancement that an SME can get. So we've got CGC, we've got SJPP that can come in to guarantee. And, I think Maybank alone, we have done a few billion, right? I think more than 20 billion ringgit just on SJPP and CGC back financing to SME. What else? Now, okay, so I think one of the things that Maybank has done, for example, is what we call digital retail SME financing, right? And this is not reliant on any collateral, right? So we look at their account We look at their transactions, we look at their receipts, payments, we look at just their, maybe we are even financing even companies that have been established less than 3 years. And the financing can go as low as 3,000 ringgit, and we already have got more than 2 billion ringgit in this portfolio. Yeah. Now, so what I'm trying to say is that banks are now gravitating towards not relying on collateral already, but looking at the behavior, looking at transaction activities, looking at how timely the owner of the SME pays the bills, right? Because that is the attitude, right? Sometimes it's more the trust that we see amongst our applicants and the profile and how they behave, as opposed to just relying on collateral. And more banks are working on that. We can do a lot more, of course, but we will take that in our spirit in terms of trying to support the SME. One of the reasons, again, why we are also investing in funding society, for example, we know that they have got different capability that we don't have in assessing SMEs, right? And the way that they provide financing, is only for maybe a few days of financing. Then they have to pay back. So it's very short-term, working capital basic. So then the whole stream of our capability is there, right? So there may be things that we may not be able to do based on our current policies, but we're also opening up to platforms like Funding Society to collaborate with Maybank to be providing these types of financing to those that may not be able to get from banks.